I'm Margaret Collins, 38 years old, and I never imagined my own sister would betray me right at our parents' dinner table. It was their 40th wedding anniversary, a night meant for joy inside their warm Austin, Texas home. I'd spent hours perfecting a rose petal cake, a recipe from my flower shop days made in honor of Mom and Dad. The dining room hummed with voices, neighbors, relatives, friends, the gentle clink of wine glasses filling the air. I was setting down the cake, proud of the soft pink swirls, when everything unraveled. My sister, 5 years younger, leaned back in her chair, her voice slicing through the laughter like a blade. "Margaret, you're dragging us down," she said, her eyes icy, not even glancing at the cake. "We want to live free of you." Her words landed like a blow. Dad, seated at the head of the table, just smiled, sipping his red wine as though she'd remarked about the weather. Mom froze, her fork hovering above her plate. The neighbors, Diane from next door, Robert and Ellen from across the street, went quiet, their gazes flicking between us. Heat burned my cheeks, but I stayed silent. I forced a grin, lifted my wine glass, and took a slow sip, the bitter flavor echoing the ache in my chest. No one spoke. Not Dad, not Mom, not even a single guest. The air turned thick, suffocating. I set my glass down, stood, and walked to my room. Calm, deliberate, each step measured. They weren't worthy of my tears. I packed one suitcase, clothes, a few photos, my laptop. The house stayed still as I slipped out the back door into the cool Texas night. My phone remained silent as I drove to a motel 10 miles away. I never looked back. I only knew this. From that night on, I would never return to being their weight. Not to anyone, not even my own family. But what about them? When the power cuts off, the water stops running, and the bills stack high, will they still find it so simple to live without me? What time is it where you are? And which city are you listening from? Drop a comment below. I want to see how far this story travels and who out there quietly relates. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell, because in the next chapter, I begin cutting off every single bill. Let's talk about boundaries, the real kind. I woke up in that motel room, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound breaking the silence. My phone lay face down on the nightstand, buzzing with unread messages from my sister and Mom. I didn't touch it. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, my mind wandering back to how I ended up here. Not just in this cheap room with scratchy sheets, but in a life where my family saw me as disposable. 5 years earlier, I owned Petals and Stems, a small flower shop in downtown Austin. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Brides would arrive nervous and glowing, asking for peonies or roses to make their day perfect. I'd stay up late arranging bouquets, my hands pricked by thorns, but I cherished every second. That shop was my pride, built from nothing after years of saving and planning. Then Dad called one night, his tone heavy. Their house, the one I grew up in, was drowning in debt. Medical bills from Mom's surgery, a second mortgage. The leaking roof made it worse. They were about to lose everything. I didn't think twice. I sold Petals and Stems for $150,000, enough to wipe their debts, fix the roof, and keep the lights on. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, thinking it would be temporary, just until they recovered. But temporary stretched into 5 years. I paid the bills. Electricity, water, internet, even the property taxes. Almost $2,000 a month wired straight from my account. I took a job at a local nursery arranging plants for half the pay I'd earned at my shop, just to keep the money flowing. Dad would nod his thanks. Mom would hug me, but my sister, she treated me like an intruder. Rebecca, Becca, as I used to call her when we were kids, was different after I returned. As children, she'd follow me everywhere, her pigtails bouncing, begging to help arrange flowers for school dances. "You're so cool, Margaret," she'd say, her eyes shining. We'd sneak into the yard at night, lying on a blanket beneath the stars, whispering about boys and dreams. I taught her to drive, covered for her when she snuck off to parties. She was my shadow, my best friend. But when I came back, that Becca was gone. She rolled her eyes when I walked into the kitchen, muttered under her breath that I was taking up space. Once, She snapped at me for leaving a coffee mug in the sink, spitting, "You don't even belong here." I brushed it aside, thinking she was stressed. Her job at the boutique barely paid, and she was always chasing online freelance gigs. But the remarks piled up, sharper every time. I tried to stay out of her way. I'd rise at dawn, slip out for coffee before anyone else stirred, and spend hours circling Town Lake just to give them space. Most nights I ate dinner alone in my room, scrolling through old photos of petals and stems, aching for the scent of fresh lilies. Dad and Mom never noticed the tension. Dad kept busy in the garage, tinkering with neighbors' lawnmowers for extra cash. Mom spent her days lost in her gardening club, chatting with Diane next door about rose bushes. They leaned on me financially, but never once asked how I was holding up. I didn't resent them. They were retired, their savings drained. But Rebecca's chill cut sharper. She'd crank her music loud enough to drown out my voice when I tried to speak, leave petty notes about chores scattered around the house. Last month, she told Mom loud enough for me to hear that I was freeloading off them, as if I wasn't the one keeping the whole place afloat. Lying in that motel bed, I saw it clearly. I'd sacrificed my business, my freedom, to keep their world together, and for what? For my sister to call me worthless, for Dad to sip his wine like it was nothing, for Mom to stay mute. The memory of Becca as a child, giggling under the stars, felt like a fabrication. She wasn't that girl anymore. Maybe she never had been. My savings were nearly drained. My paycheck from the nursery barely covered my own needs, and I was still bleeding money into a house that didn't even want me. I sat up, chest tight, and grabbed my laptop. I had to know exactly how much weight I was carrying for them. That's when the idea began to form. Not revenge. Not yet. I checked out of the motel by noon, my suitcase rattling in the trunk as I drove across Austin to Thomas and Laura's house. They'd been my lifeline since selling petals and stems, always ready with a hot cup of coffee or a well-timed joke. Their bungalow in Hyde Park felt worlds away from the motel's buzzing fluorescent lights. It was a place I could finally breathe, think, and plan my next step. As I pulled into their driveway, my phone kept buzzing with messages I still refused to open. Thomas opened the door before I even knocked. His brow was furrowed with concern. "Margaret, what happened?" he asked, pulling me inside. Laura was already in the kitchen, setting out sandwiches, her eyes soft yet searching. I sank into a chair at their dining table, the weight of the past 24 hours pressing into my chest. I told them everything, not about the cake or the wine, but about the sting of my sister's words. How she'd called me unappreciated. How Dad just sipped his glass without a word. How Mom stayed silent. She claimed they'd be better off without me. I told Thomas, my voice steady though my throat burned, and no one stopped her. Laura reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Thomas leaned back, his jaw tightening as if piecing together a story he already knew. "You know," he said after a pause, "this reminds me of Edward Hayes." Edward Hayes was an old acquaintance from our early business years, a man who ran a landscaping company back when I was opening my flower shop. Thomas told the story as if it happened yesterday. Edward's grown daughter had lived rent-free in a house he paid for. She'd called him controlling, said he was in her way, even though he covered her car payments, utilities, even daycare for her son. One day she told him not to come around anymore. Said he was dragging her down? Edward didn't argue. He canceled everything. The power, the water, the car lease. Within weeks, she was begging him to return, promising she'd change. He never went back, Thomas said, his voice low and steady. He bought a condo in San Antonio and started over. She had to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. Sometimes people need to feel the full weight before they value what you've carried. Laura nodded, sliding a cup of coffee toward me. "You've been holding your family up for years, Margaret," she said. "What would they even do without your money?" That question hit harder than I expected. I had never thought of it that way, not really. I had always seen those payments as helping, not enabling. But sitting there with Thomas and Laura, both looking at me like someone who deserved better, the truth was undeniable. My sister, my dad, my mom, they'd built an entire life around my sacrifices. without ever seeing me in it. I opened my laptop. My fingers moved before doubt could creep in. I logged into my bank account, the screen filling with rows of automatic payments. Electricity, $300 a month. Water, $100. Internet, $80. Home insurance, $400. Repairs, streaming subscriptions, random fees. Nearly $2,000 draining every month from the savings I had built arranging roses and lilies. Thomas gave a small nod like he already knew what I was about to do. Laura stayed quiet, her face calm but firm. I clicked into the payment settings. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. Electricity cut. Water disconnected. Internet gone. Insurance canceled. One by one, I severed every cord binding me to that house. Each click felt like dropping a burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I wasn't furious, not anymore. I felt clearer than I had in years. They wanted life without me. So be it. I closed the laptop. Thomas set a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. Laura offered me their guest room, told me I could stay as long as I needed. I thanked them, my voice softer, but my decision firm. My phone buzzed again. Another message, probably from Mom or my sister. I didn't check it, not yet. I wasn't ready for excuses. I needed to hold on to this clarity before the storm returned, because I knew it would. They were about to feel the fallout, and this time I'd be ready. 3 days after I ended every auto payment, the cracks began to show. I was at Thomas and Laura's kitchen table sipping coffee when my phone rang. Rebecca's name lit up the screen like a warning sign. I let it buzz a few times before answering. "Margaret, what did you do?" Her voice was sharp, tinged with panic. "The internet's out. I can't submit my freelance work. And Mom's losing it because we just got shut-off notices for power and water. Turn it back on now. No hello, no apology, just commands, as if I was still the unpaid manager of their lives." I leaned back in my chair, steadying my voice. "You said you wanted to live without me," I told her. "Well, this is what that looks like." Rebecca didn't hesitate. "You're being dramatic, Margaret." "Just flip everything back on." I wasn't shocked. She'd always had a way of twisting things, making me feel like the problem. I could hear Mom in the background, her voice shaky, probably fretting about the fridge losing power. "It's not my job to keep your world running," I told her. "You're 30 years old. Figure it out." There was a pause. Then she laughed, bitter and cruel. "You're so sensitive. Nobody wants you around. This is why." Then she hung up. I placed the phone down. My chest burned, but my hands stayed steady. Laura glanced from the counter, raising an eyebrow. "She's got some nerve." Thomas folded his newspaper with a low chuckle. "Give it a few days. They'll feel it." I nodded, though something twisted inside me. Mom's voice, nervous, unsettled, stuck with me. She hadn't defended me that night, hadn't said a word. But she was still my mother. Was I punishing her too? I pushed the thought aside. They let Rebecca speak for all of them. That was their choice. Later that afternoon, Mom called. Her voice was soft, pleading. "Margaret, sweetheart, please. The house is falling apart. Rebecca can't work. Your dad can't take mower jobs without Wi-Fi. Can't you just turn everything back on? We're family." I closed my eyes, picturing her in the living room with her gardening books, probably wringing her hands the way she always did when anxious. "Mom," I said, steady but not cold, "Rebecca said you'd all be better off without me. You didn't disagree. So I'm giving her exactly what she wanted." Silence stretched. Then she whispered, "She didn't mean it. You know how she gets. Please come home." I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the month spent tiptoeing through that house, paying every bill, absorbing Rebecca's jabs, hoping for even a shred of gratitude. "I'm not coming back," I said. "Not until Rebecca takes responsibility for what she said." Mom tried to argue, but I cut her off. "You let her say it. You and Dad sat there. You're all responsible." Then I ended the call. My pulse raced, but my mind was sharp. Laura had heard it all. She gave me a small nod. "You're stronger than I would have been," she said. I didn't feel strong. I felt drained but focused. That evening, Rebecca called again, angrier now. "You think this is funny, Margaret? The neighbors are noticing." Diane came by acting concerned, but I know she's just being nosy. "You're humiliating us." I nearly laughed. Humiliating them after everything. That's what mattered now. "You embarrassed yourself," I said. "You wanted me gone. Well, I'm gone. Handle your own bills." She exploded, calling me selfish, accusing me of always being jealous. I didn't bother listening. I ended the call and blocked her number. Thomas walked in as I set the phone down. He gave me a thumbs up. "About time," he said. The next morning, Mom left a voicemail. Her tone was softer, almost desperate. "Margaret, we can't keep up without you. The water bills do. Rebecca's trying to borrow money from Diane. Please just talk to us." I didn't return the call. I wasn't ready for more excuses, more pleas that dodged the truth. Rebecca had drawn the line that night, and Mom and Dad had let her. Now they were scrambling, and I wasn't going to rescue them. Not this time. I stayed with Thomas and Laura. I helped Laura prepare dinner, talked with Thomas about his new organic shop. Their home felt like refuge, a place where I wasn't overlooked. But I knew the storm hadn't passed. Rebecca wouldn't back down, and Mom's calls would keep pressing. I braced myself for what was next, knowing deep down I'd made the right choice, no matter how heavy it weighed. 2 weeks after the power went out, the fractures in my family's world began to spread. I was still at Thomas and Laura's, settling into their guest room, when I got a text from Diane, the neighbor next door to my parents' house. "Everything okay with your folks?" it read. "Heard some things." I didn't respond, but I knew exactly what she meant. Austin's a large city, but neighborhoods like ours whisper, and the Collins family was becoming the subject of chatter. I'd blocked Rebecca's number, but Mom's voicemails kept piling, each one more frantic than the last. I listened to the newest, her voice worn thin. "Margaret, we got a notice from the bank," she said. "We're behind on the house payments. Please call me." I erased the message, but it clung to me. The bank notice didn't shock me. Without my monthly transfers, the mortgage, utilities, and taxes were crushing them. My sister had leaned on me to keep that roof up, her boutique job barely covering herself. Now, with no internet to chase her freelance work, she was drowning. Thomas caught me studying my phone and raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you're softening, are you?" he teased. I shook my head. "They need to learn," I said. But my voice lacked the firmness I wanted. Laura, slicing vegetables for dinner, looked over. "They'll work it out," she said. "Or they won't. Either way, it's not your burden anymore." The next day, I drove by the old neighborhood, not to visit, but to pick up a package I'd redirected to a nearby post office. As I turned onto our street, I spotted Robert and Ellen Parker, the couple across from my parents, standing in their yard, murmuring. They froze when they noticed my car, Ellen waving half-heartedly. I didn't wave back. Diane was out too, watering her roses, her gaze flicking toward my parents' house. The yard was unkempt, the mailbox spilling envelopes, no doubt. I kept going, but the picture stuck. My family's life unraveling, plain to everyone. Later that week, Laura told me, through a mutual friend, that my sister had lost a major freelance contract. Without internet, she couldn't deliver her designs for a clothing brand she'd been courting. The client moved on, and Rebecca was scrambling. She'd picked up a night shift at a local supermarket stocking shelves to cover bills. I pictured her under the buzz of fluorescent lights, pushing a cart of canned goods, her pride bruised. A pang tugged at me. She was still my sister. But then I remembered her words at that dinner, cutting and smug. She'd chosen this path, not me. Mom appeared at Thomas and Laura's unannounced one evening, her face worn, her usual garden club brightness gone. I was in the living room helping Laura sort old photo albums when the doorbell rang. Thomas answered, and Mom stood in the entry, clutching her purse like armor. "Margaret, we need to talk," she said, her voice low and urgent. I stayed seated, motioning to the couch. "Sit, Mom," I said, keeping even. She hesitated, then perched at the edge, her eyes restless like she feared settling. "The bank's threatening foreclosure," she said, her words spilling. "Rebecca's working nights, but it's not enough. Your dad's trying to take on more repair jobs, but without Wi-Fi, he can't get requests. We're breaking apart, Margaret. Her hands twisted the strap of her purse, and for a flicker, I saw the woman who'd taught me to plant tulips. Not the one who sat silent while Rebecca tore me down. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, choosing carefully. But Rebecca said you didn't need me. She's the one who needs to fix this. Mom's eyes widened. She's your sister, she pleaded. She's trying, but it's hard. Can't you help until we get steady again? I leaned in, my tone firm. Mom, I paid for that house for years. Bills, repairs, everything. Rebecca called me unwanted and you let her. I'm finished carrying her choices. Mom's face folded, but she didn't fight. Your dad's lost, she murmured. He keeps to himself, but he's worried. I wasn't surprised. Dad had always been a bystander, tinkering in his garage while the family fractured. Then he can go to Rebecca, I said. She's the one who started this. Mom rose, her shoulders bent. I thought family meant more to you, she whispered, and walked out without another word. Laura, who'd stayed quiet, touched my arm. You did the right thing, she said. I nodded, but the weight of Mom's words clung to me. The neighborhood whispers only grew louder. Diane whispered to a friend who passed it on, saying the Collins household was crumbling. At a block party, Robert Parker casually mentioned Dad's unpaid repair bills. Rebecca's job at the grocery store turned into a running gag among the neighbors, a stark contrast to the image of a freelance designer she once flaunted. I kept my distance, throwing myself into my work at the nursery, stashing away the little I had left. But I could feel the strain tightening. My family's clock was running out, and I refused to rescue them. Not this time, not ever. 3 months after I cut ties, the house that shaped my childhood was gone. My sister, Dad, and Mom sold it, crushed under the weight of the mortgage and piling debts. Diane, the ever-watchful neighbor who thrived on gossip, texted me a photo of the for sale sign staked in their front yard, the paint peeling and the lawn still untamed. I ignored it, but through Laura, I learned they'd relocated to a cramped rental on the outskirts of Austin, a single-bedroom space, far removed from the community they had cherished for decades. Robert and Ellen Parker spread the tale to anyone willing to listen, recounting the Collins' downfall between block parties and coffee runs. My sister endured their stares each time she left the apartment, her head lowered, her designer ambitions buried under hard reality. I never went to see them. My decision was final. I was piecing together a new life. With what remained of my savings, I bought a humble one-bedroom condo in South Austin, tucked near a park where I could stroll and reflect. At first the walls were bare, but soon I filled them with sketches of blossoms, roses, lilies, peonies, silent echoes of the shop I once ran. I found work as a consultant for a florist, designing wedding bouquets and teaching small workshops on arranging flowers. It wasn't the shop I'd lost, but it felt like a step back toward myself. Each paycheck went into my own account, untouched by anyone else's needs. For the first time in years, I rested without the crushing weight of their demands on my chest. One morning, coffee warming my hands at the counter, a letter slid through the door. The handwriting was instantly familiar. Rebecca's tidy, deliberate script, just like the notes she'd scribbled for me as a child. I placed it down unopened, staring at it for what felt like hours. A part of me longed to see if she'd finally recognize the truth, but another part, the one scarred by her cold accusations, knew it would change nothing. When I eventually opened it, her tone was softer than I had braced for. Margaret, it began. I'm sorry for what I said. I was stressed, angry, but that doesn't excuse it. I didn't realize all you had done for us. I hope we can talk. No mention of Dad. No mention of Mom. No promise to set things right. Just a plea, too little and far too late. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer alongside old photographs I hadn't touched in months. I chose not to answer. Rebecca wanted a life without me, and I was giving it to her, not out of malice, but because I deserved a life where I wasn't unseen. Dad's silence. Mom's pleading. Rebecca's sharpness. They had revealed exactly who they were, and I wasn't stepping back into that storm. I blocked their numbers, erased their messages, and let the space between us widen. Thomas and Laura still checked in, bringing dinner or inviting me to their garden parties. But I was finally learning to stand alone, and it felt right. Looking back now, the lesson is carved deep into every step of this collapse. Family isn't only blood. It's respect. It's mutual effort. It's the willingness to recognize one another's sacrifices. I poured myself into holding their world together, but they dismissed it. That disregard shattered us. Rebecca, Dad, and Mom discovered, too late, that words carry weight and choices carry consequences. They're rebuilding in their own way now, and I hold no bitterness. But I refuse to shoulder their burdens anymore. Independence, I've realized, is the base of any connection worth keeping. Without it, love is just a shell, fragile and hollow. And to all of you who have followed me this far, thank you. Your time, your presence, it means more than I can put into words. I've told this story because I know some of you have felt the same. Overlooked, unappreciated, after giving your all to those you cared for. You carried them only to be discarded. I see you, and I'm grateful for every moment you've spent here with me. If my journey resonates, tap subscribe, hit the bell, and be part of this space. Share your own story in the comments. How did you discover your strength? Let's keep this conversation alive, because together, we are stronger.